Hey, Mark Giovanni here, Symphonic Virtual Orchestration. This is another video in the series of interviews to composers and mixing engineers in the LA scene. Today we've got the pleasure of having Bobby Fernandez with us. Great, Bobby Fernandez. Hey, how are you, Bobby?
Hey, fine. Hello, everybody.
Thanks for being with us.
Pleasure.
Bobby doesn't need introduction. He's worked with the best of the best. He's 3 times Grammy winner. He's done all the Clint Eastwood movies. He's mixed for Danny Elfman, Brian Tyler. But Bobby, tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get started in the industry?
Well, I started at Warner Brothers basically as an assistant. I wanted to work on the scoring stage to become a scoring mixer. So in my first interview with the head of the sound department, he was asking me what I wanted to do and why I wanted to get into film sound. I said, I want to record music for motion pictures. And he said, well, you want to become a scoring mixer. I said, okay, that's what I want to become, a scoring mixer. And he said to me, I can make that happen for you, but what you have to do for me is I want you to learn as much about film sound as you possibly can. And this is a while back, so I said, yeah, so I'm going to quiz you every now and then. And so I bought this book. I don't know if it's even still in print anymore. It's a big blue and white book called the Audio Cyclopedia, which at that time had a lot of information about film sound, which isn't used much anymore. But so I carried that book around with me. It's like a 9-10 pound book I carried everywhere, and I was constantly asking everybody questions. So I sort of got the nickname as like the pest. Here comes this kid again. He doesn't stop asking questions, and I would do that and do that and do that. So every now and then I'd run into the head of the sound department and he'd say, hey, I want to ask you about this, and I would answer the question. He's great, okay. So then at one point he called me up to his office and he said, okay, you kept your word, I'm going to keep mine. Starting on Monday, you're going over to the scoring stage, where you're going to train with Danny Wallen, and Danny Wallen is, my mentor and now living in Hawaii. But Danny was, or still is, in my mind, the best scoring engineer that ever came out of Hollywood. Amazing guy. Up until recently, he was working with Michael Giacchino until he took off to Hawaii. But Danny is a fantastic guy, and he's the guy that sort of took me under his wing and trained me. So as I was talking to Al Green up in his office, he said, so starting on Monday, I want you to go to report to Danny on the scoring stage, and he's going to train you. And as I started to walk out of the room, Al said, hey, I forgot to mention, I said, what's that? There's a good chance he's not going to like you. And I said, well, welcome to the club. I said, there's a lot of people downstairs that don't like me because I asked too many questions. Well, it turns out that we hit it off immediately. We hit it off. And so that started my training. And I had a good idea of what, I had, a good idea of microphones and what they did and how, but he just made me feel like I really didn't know anything, because in comparison to what he was offering, what he was going to teach me, I didn't. So the thing was, when you meet someone like that, just keep your mouth shut and listen, because you don't try and outthink them or whatever, or try to assume what they're going to. Just listen and take in. You're a sponge. Just take in everything they say. So I would start doing the setups, and I was working with another guy who was already a seasoned guy who'd been working there. So he would let me set up the microphones, and I'd be hanging U67s, because she loves U67s, and today it's still one of my favorite microphones. And I would hang the microphones up, and then he would come in and he would look, and he'd walk around and he'd call me over and he'd say, see this microphone, what's wrong with it? No? And I won't repeat what he said to me, but he said, well, where's your head? And what he meant by that. And so the microphone is backwards, and it was, and he said, so he would go through and he would pick out all these things. And this went on for probably maybe a month, about a month and a half. And because we were working a lot. I mean, we were doing 3 to 4 sessions a day, because he was a very, very busy guy. And so I was, right along with him. So after about a month and a half, maybe 2 at the most, he came in, and it was a big date. I forget what the name of the film was. And he came in and he looked around. He walked through the entire orchestra. There's probably about an 85-piece orchestra. He walked around, checked every microphone, and I'm sitting there. I'm at the back of the room just waiting to hear what he has to say. Then I get up and I start following him around. And then he walks all the way around. He starts, as you walk in, there's the low strings, then into the brass, into the woodwinds, percussion comes around, this violins, everything. And he looks at me and he says, you finally got it. And he went in the control room. And from that point on, he would walk on the stage and he'd never check anything. He said, like, and I thought, well, that's a vote of confidence. Like, so, but that was it. He was my mentor and just a phenomenal guy. So there was like just a lot of information coming out of him. Now, that being said, being at Warner Brothers, I was exposed to a lot of other people that came in. We did a lot of record work there. So I had a chance to work with some really interesting people like Tom Dowd, who was a phenomenal engineer producer. I worked with him for a while. He came to Warner's and he camped out there for a while and worked on a record. George Martin came by, and so I camped out with George Martin. I was his assistant. And Lee Hirschberg, because Warner Records was on the same lot with us. So Lee Hirschberg, and then there was Ted Templeman, Lenny Waronker, producers for Warner Brothers. So I assisted on a lot of their records, which was everything from Sinatra to the Doobie Brothers, to whoever was on the Warner label. I was there at the tape. That was a tape machine now, not Pro Tools where you don't worry about punching in. I mean, here's where you punch in, it's gone.
You had to cut the tape.
Yeah, I got pretty good at editing tape and punching in, because there's no room for error on that stuff.
When did you get the chance? Because back then you were assisting or helping the main guy.
You're right.
When did you get the chance to be the main guy?
Well, probably, let's see, 4 years later. 4 years later, I was, at that point, I was now stage manager. So I would call the office and say, listen, we're coming in. This is our call. I'm bringing in the guys at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning. We have, depending on what the start of the year was. And so I called in on a Friday, and the secretary said, well, you're no longer on the stage. Al wants to see you up in the office. And I thought, when he said you're no longer on the stage, I thought, did I just get fired? And so I went up into the office, and there at the office was Al at his desk, and then Danny Wallen was sitting out on the chair in front of the desk, and he said, come on, we want to talk to you. Al said to me, Danny thinks it's about time you start mixing. So I said, oh, okay. He said, but before that, and I thought, here's another before. So before you do that, before you start recording or mixing, because Danny feels that you're ready to go, we want you to spend, and Danny and I both agree, we want you to spend a year on the dubbing stage, because we want you to know what's expected from a scoring mixer. So don't just mix stuff and send it up. Know why you're doing what you're doing and why you separate stuff out. So I did that. So I was on the dub stage I didn't last a year. It was probably 8 months when I was working on a mini-series, and I was a music dubbing mixer or re-recording mixer. When the head of the sound department comes in, now Al Green had since at that point had retired and someone else had taken over, but still had a great relationship with him. So it was Tom McCormick. So Tom McCormick was now the head of the sound department. He came in with, at the time, was the head of the music for Columbia. So they came in, and with a couple of other people, they came in, and we had to stop in the middle of the show, and they said, we need you on the scoring stage right away. And I said, but I'm in the middle of a show. I said, don't worry about it, you've replaced. We want you to come with us. So at that time, I was was I 24, skinny and long hair. And so they used to call me, like, they thought I was the rock and roll guy, and quite the opposite. And I was more like, I loved orchestral stuff. But, I played in rock bands like every kid, played in rock bands and stuff. But I loved orchestral music. So anyway, we want you to come over, we need you right now. And there was a film, the title was Hardcore. And it was, Jack Nietzsche was the composer. It was a very gritty guitar, heavy score, and so it turns out that the guy that was recording the score didn't really have a sense for rock. He had one mic over the drum kit, like you'd treat like a jazz kit or something. And anyway, Jack didn't like the sound he was getting, so they walked me onto the scoring stage, and you get this feeling that you've just been thrown to the wolves, because, first of all, the guy that was the head of the music department, he and I did not get, this is Columbia, not Warner's. Warner's and I had a great relationship, but Columbia and I, no. So the head of the music department for Columbia walked me over there, and he said, he introduced me. First, he introduced me by the wrong name, and he said, he introduced me as, again, the wrong name, and and put his arm around me and said, "He's our rock and roll mixer." And I thought, "Oh my God, I've just
he looks like a rock and roll mixer.
Yeah. I've just been thrown to the wolves." So anyway, they introduced me to Jack Nietzsche, and it was kind of crazy because at that point, in the room was Jack Nietzsche, his agent, the head of Columbia Pictures at the time. Who else? George C. Scott, the lead actor, was there, and several other high-powered people. And so, getting that introduction as the rock and roll guy, and just being thrown in there. So I approached Jack, and we kind of hit it off right away. Probably because I looked like a rock and roll guy, which it wasn't really. But so we talked. What's the problem? And we walk out and look at the drum kit. So the guy that is now the stage manager was the guy that I trained. So I said, "Let's do this." So we spent about 20 minutes on stage, and we remiked everything. Then I got a sound on everything, and got the kick drum, snare, compressors on the guitar, and everything, and had the band rehearse, and Jack said, "That's the sound I want."
You did a good job.
Yeah, and I never went back to the scoring stage. I mean, back to the dub stage after that. I stayed. So that hardcore was actually my first film at 24, and then after that, I just stayed and just film after film after film after film, which was great. I mean, it's I guess baptism by fire. You get thrown into a situation like that, and
you deliver.
If you're ready, you're ready.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's sink or swim, and that turned out okay.
Yeah.